All right, we're back on day 2, and I have some magnificent, fantastic news to start us off with, which is that after the stream last night, I managed to restore my old VM and do some cleanup on it, which means that I have basically all of everything that I thought that I lost. So that is super awesome. I've done a little bit today already. I've been working for, I don't know, about the last hour to just recreate some of the stuff that we did yesterday in the environment in terms of updating dependencies and the Node and Mongo libraries. So we didn't have to re-see that again. And also, on top of that, I also made the code or copied over the code changes that we made that were necessary to get things running. And so now if I run the server, oh, that's not quite visible there, with the command that is on the command line that I've created, that should be going. And as I mentioned yesterday, with the nice thing about using gedit is one thing I can do is have the log open, and it will automatically update or reload when it needs to. So as we can see, now the server is running, and we've got the newest Node version. We've got updated all of our npm packages. I was also able to, oh, what is this? Not quite sure what that is. It must, okay, whatever, that's not important because it's not what is in our actual packages. But I was able to drop another library that was this npm edge, and I'll just explain that really quickly. So what I have with this npm install, which ran the npm installation, it used to use this external module to try to determine what's out of date, but that was also causing me some problems, and I removed it. But fortunately, npm is updated, so that's now a built-in feature, and so I just replaced that in both the Windows and Linux versions of the script. I haven't checked the Windows version yet because I don't know what state that's in at the moment, but the Linux one works now. So when you run that, it will update all of your dependencies, and it also will tell you if any of them are out of date. So that is super handy. But okay, anyway, so we're running the engine now, as you can see, and what I'm going to do is demonstrate somewhere. I have a million billion tabs open, but I'm going to make one specifically for us to view here. So as you can see, the game is currently running. Well, it's not really a game, it's the test environment that demonstrates the engine's capability. I have another tab off screen which I'm going to run as well. And as you can see, that guy can be controlled, or it can control the original one as we like, and the multiplayer and all that good stuff is working. So yay, we're in a workable state-ish. All right, but there's some things that we've sort of skipped over, which we need to take care of. One of them is, you might remember, I removed npm, or sorry, Node Inspector, which is a debugger for Node that allows us to debug the Node server from the client, because that library was out of date and not supported anymore. So what I have, where are we here? And another tab was the GitHub page where it was saying, oh, that basically this isn't used anymore and it's deprecated, so we need to look at this blog post. So maybe I should have read that before getting on the stream, but whatever, we're going to sort of do it together. No, I don't want to deal with that. Okay. So, yeah, so we have the current version of Node. We have a much newer version than that. Oh my goodness, is it really that easy? It looks like it might be. So it looks like if we run with this inspect or inspect break, which should basically start at the beginning, and then we can open this, open about inspect in Chrome, redirect you to Chrome inspect. So let's just start with one thing at a time here. So I have a script already for running the node debugger. We're going to open that with a gedit. So this is what there used to be, and we're going to comment that out for the moment, and we're going to try our new command here that they're mentioning, wherever that was here. But actually, I think we're going to put the one that actually puts a breakpoint when the application first starts, because that is probably more useful in my experience. There used to be a way, whatever, that's probably the thing that we want. Okay. So node 6, you need to use this and then inspect. Okay. We shouldn't get ahead of myself. All right. Well, first to start with, let's run our. Actually, which one did we? This was running the node debugger, which is actually different. Okay, so it used to be that you had to run a debugger and then also run the debug server, or tell it to run the server as debug. And I think actually probably the other one is going to be irrelevant. On this one, I had like scripts redirecting stuff. Apparently, a bunch of this stuff will fortunately then probably get cleaned up as being irrelevant. So the node debugger was the one that we already opened, and then debug server, this guy. There we go. Oh yeah, and this ran with authbind because if it didn't, the thing couldn't bind to port 80. But we'll come back to that, I think. Okay, so well, actually, we'll need the new one as well. So our new command is, where did it go? This guy. Although we're still going to need authbind on here, and I don't remember if this deep whatever is related to authbind or if it's something else. We're going to have to take a look by looking at, say, running the regular server. So this one does more stuff. Yeah, deep. I forget what this does, but it's important for authbind. So we're going to keep it. As you can see, this script does a whole bunch more stuff by setting up basically log and time stamping and a bunch of stuff, which is kind of handy. So, okay, that should allow us to actually run the thing, except what we need to run is this guy, not the index, because we don't give a crap about. That's their example. Okay, so where were we? I've got multiple tabs open. Why don't I merge this guy in so I have fewer windows hanging out? Actually, we can refresh this too, so it should be nothing there. Yep, okay. So next you'll open the big Chrome DevTools URL it spits out, but there's a better way. Open About Inspect in Chrome. This will redirect you. You'll see something like this. Okay, so for starters, we need to run our debug server. Run. What was it? Server debug. Was it? Is that the file that we're in? It better be. No. What's up with that? This is just debug server. There's no run because this one. Okay, that's right. That's because this is basically telling it to run the debugger and then debug it, whereas this guy was basically just going to start. So this whole file is going to become irrelevant, but we can clean that up in a little bit. Right. Yeah, so we were going to basically run the server. That's what we're going to do. So debug server. Okay, so this says it's listening on this thing, but according to our window or article that we're reading, we can basically try this. Chrome Inspect. Let's give that a shot. Click on the Open Dedicated DevTools for the node link. Okay, we did that, but that's not helped us yet. You get a pop-up window for the debug session, which we did. Better than that, you will kill and restart node. The window will automatically reconnect to it. Well, it didn't. Maybe what we should do is actually use the thing that it generated instead of following this article. We could do that because it was saying like, oh, it's going to spit out a value, and it did do that. So well, maybe. Because okay. I wonder if I did something wrong here. Because this does not, well, it seems to want to know which of these things should be connected to, but I don't know. This article is not turning out to be super helpful. So I'm missing something. Click the Open Dedicated DevTools node, which we did, and that generated this other window. You'll get a pop-up window, but better than that, when you kill and restart node, the node window will automatically reconnect to it. Okay, so maybe I have to restart. Okay, we restarted, and that did not happen. Ah, maybe we have to select this guy. Ah, you know what the problem is, I think, is because we're running through, this is running on the VM, and I'm running the debugger from Windows, which I think it does not like. That makes some sense. I have Chrome technically on my VM, but it often has problems, so I'm not sure if I want to like launch it from here. We could do though. That would be really annoying, if I'm honest. I'd rather not. Connection. Why can't you? Well. Ah, wait a minute. Well, this is probably not going to work because this says it's on 127.01, which might only be readable from there, but we're going to give it a try. And that was 9229. So if I stop this and run it again, is it going to be smart enough? No, not so far. I might have to run it from the actual VM. That would be really annoying. I didn't used to have to do that. The other thing that's a little bit strange about this is the thing that this, well actually, you know what, let's copy their recommended, oh come on. Let's look at the regular documentation. Security implications. Exposing the port publicly isn't safe. Yeah, I totally understand that. So I have a firewall set up. I don't know. Maybe I need to run Chrome from in the VM. Let's try it. I might restore. Yeah, I'm afraid that might reveal stuff. Let's try it. That's okay. Looks like we're okay. So what I'm going to do is go back to that thing. We'll use the debugger in here. So, hey, we can actually see it. Fantastic. Okay, so our debugger now works for the server itself, which is great because now we can. So basically, this is the load function. It's going to create namespaces and do a whole bunch of yay happiness. Okay, so actually this is really good because when I first started using Node friggin' almost a decade ago, there wasn't a built-in debugger like this, which is why I was using the Node Inspector, which was an external library that only worked some of the time. It was really annoying, but now it looks like it's built in, and as long as I don't mind using the debugger on the VM itself, because it sounds like it's possible to set up external connections, but it's probably not even worth doing that, at least as a default. But if for some reason people want to, they can look up the documentation themselves and change that. So that is really great news. So I think now what we could do is clean up a bunch of these old scripts that we had, whose sole purpose was allowing us to be able to debug. And we have multiple ones. I'm going to make this a little bit wider so I can see all the file names. The debugger one, I think, will be able to go away completely. This guy will be able to transform into this, because this used to have to run the debugger separately. So let's do this. Okay. Actually, let's just do everything that has to do with the debug, or edit all of them. So that's debugging server. That's the run. That's a regular run server debug, and just make sure we have all of those open. Although we're going to completely destroy some of them. Okay. So basically, the way we have everything named in here, pretty much everything that's relevant is runs. We have run npm install, the run server. The only thing that's not is these setup links. So basically, all the other ones we're going to make those go away. So run server debug, for example. Well, that's the bat version, which we're not going to look at just yet. Actually, let's put these all together so we can take care of them at once. So, okay, so these guys used to just run the debugger, which that is going to go away. The main one that we want to keep only is going to be this guy. So let's comment out both of these, and we're going to replace this with our new command that we have here. I guess actually, well, so technically in the old one I had this wait command at the end. Wait, did I copy that from the right place? Oh yeah, that's the old one that we don't care about. Actually, you know what? I think we can just delete both of these node debugger ones outright. Node debugger. Goodbye. So that's going to say, do I want to save it? And I don't, because we no longer need these files. Technically, yeah, we're not going to need those either, but one thing at a time. Okay, so the command that we needed was here, but I also have this return here, or pause. Normally this won't necessarily be a problem during development, because you'll be using Control-C to kill the process all the time, but technically the server could run to completion and end like the game is over, and we want that to be still the case. So I'm going to copy that guy as well. So where this used to run the old debugger and then run the debug server, actually I suppose we could, no, let's just again do one at a time. So this server here no longer needs to run both of those. It just, the debug server bat, which is basically the same as this guy, except we don't need the auth binds in Windows. So what this would look like now, if we kept it, would be like so. Although this isn't going to be relevant because debug server bat. We can just have this guy. Although does have a pause at the end. We're going to keep that. So the node debugger is gone. Check. Debug server has two commands that we care about. Whoops. Which we already have. So we can delete these guys. And we no longer need these ones either. So this should work now for both Windows and Linux. And then these files, the debug server ones, we should also be able to get rid of. Debug server. See ya. Perfect. So we've actually cleaned up a bunch of stuff by not having to use that old crappy debugger, and now we have a better debugger for running to debug our server-side code. So we still have the npm installations. We've got the ability to run a server, and we've got the ability to run the server and debug. And this sets up links for stuff that's not relevant at the moment. Does this have anything in it? Nothing that's important. It's just a note to the user. Perfect. Okay, so run server debug. Bingo. Look at that. Freaking instantaneously. And now we can step through. We've got debugging of our game server / web server. Freaking fantastic. It's great that things are finally coming together. Yesterday was a total mess. But don't worry, at some point I'm going to, or my main goal at the moment now is to get the engine and actually the installation project I have as well set up so that people can really easily install this and start working on their own if they wish to. That's my first and primary goal. Once we have that working, then the next thing will be to start making, well, I'll probably give some overview of the engine of what's what and like how the actual game programming with it works. And then from there, I probably will start working on many of the backlog of improvements that I have in mind for this, because, well, there's a whole bunch of stuff there and a whole bunch of stuff running, and I'm pretty happy with a lot of it. There's a lot of stuff that I want to refactor and make better. I have an entire huge freaking awesome, well, actually it's minimal in its implementation, which is really important, but I have a really nice UI library that I built on the side, and actually some of the stuff in there for the event systems, which allows you to subscribe and publish to things. This is a much nicer system than what's in the engine, and so I want to change that around so that I'll have the standalone UI framework, and then which could be making any kind of web page, and then the engine will make use of that, or basically be a sort of extension, and then like games and any game libraries that I or anybody else make can also be extensions, and it will automatically manage the packaging and all that stuff. So speaking of which, so we fixed the debugger now, which is one of the problems that are things that we had to remove yesterday because the library was outdated. But there's another one, and that is the fact, or another thing that we need to fix, which is that in the engine settings, okay, maybe I will give a little bit of background here. This file, which also needs cleanup and will be divided into sub files, has basically a global setting. So we have the global namespace, which is this ECGE game, and then everything actually is under this related to the engine and games as well. It's basically like the global namespace. And this settings object is basically a namespace for all kinds of global settings that you could want, including being able to change things about the back buffers and whatnot for automatically or when you create a new scene. It's got stuff about sound, volume, and Doppler settings. Actually, it doesn't have this at the moment, but I'm going to put, actually I started a thing already, I think, that basically allows you to map input controls. Basically, the keyboard, mouse and keyboard and controllers all already work in the engine, but if you want to specifically map, have custom mappable keys instead of hard coding them, which is what I've done so far, we're going to get that going at some point. This is stuff about the world, which these are probably defaults. And in fact, actually, this might even be able to go away because these are things about like tile sizes and stuff for the 2D stuff. And this will probably just be parameters when you create an instance of a game world that can be set there and doesn't need this, but that isn't really important right now. The point is this is a big structure of like globally accessed variables. Yeah, like I said, some of them need to go away, but it's been convenient for a number of things. We've got stuff about networking. We've got, actually this is kind of important right now, whether or not it's the server or not. By default it's not, but the server code actually changes this to true. So other things wanting to know when you have game code that runs on both the client and the server, it needs to know this is where it's at. Stuff about the timer, blah blah blah. Okay, but we also have a bunch of server specific settings, like whether or not it should use HTTPS, which actually that should always be true when you need logins, which are currently disabled, but they all work, or at least they did. Maybe our library update broke some stuff, but we'll find that out eventually if it's the case. Yeah, but one of the important things that we turned off yesterday was this compress client code. And you might remember that basically the game crashed. I can close this, I think. The game crashed when I ran it without this. And so that needs to be fixed. Now, basically what the compression is you have your JavaScript code, and we want to minimize it because it saves a whole bunch of bandwidth when you download stuff, or when the code comes to the individual clients. But also potentially if you have like secrets in your code that you don't want people to read, like a really dedicated hacker could figure it out, but basically by compressing and obfuscating the code, we'll make that more difficult. The engine is open source, of course, so people would be able to look at it, although maybe at some point I'll have proprietary updates or something. We'll see. But in general, basically we compress and obfuscate the code. It gives a huge boost to download and whatnot. But it's possible that the compression code messes up sometimes. And I think that is probably the case now. And so, because the game crashed before. So I'm going to run it without the debug now, because I don't really care, excuse me, about it being debugged. What I care is whether or not the client is going to work correctly, and as you can see, it does not. So if we open the debugger for this, we can say, oh hey, there's an unexpected identifier, and here we can see compressed and obfuscated code. This is not very readable. In fact, if you go to Google or something like this and open up their code, it's also tends to be obfuscated, and so it's just like massive amount of stuff. Not everything is obfuscated, but the vast majority of it is. And this basically, yeah, it's much smaller and it's really hard. It makes it much harder for someone to like hack up your code and in the case of a game cheats. Although the other thing that's really important is that the server needs to be authoritative on stuff. So even if clients do change, hack up stuff, they could only alter their own client's experience and not handle someone else. And I'm happy to say that at least if you use the engine correctly, that's already supported as well. Both the the project that I've worked on so far with it absolutely is set up that way. Someone's mowing the lawn. I hope that's not too loud. Anyway, the point is we have some kind of problem in runtime, but we can't see exactly what the problem is. Whoops. Because the code actually is obfuscated. So how can we fix that? Well, do I have more than one of these? Apparently I do. Well, what we can do actually is there's more than one setting here. So there's general compression, but then also within that, there's other specific settings. So there's remove the new line white space. So if I change this, actually no, that's not even the relevant one. The one I want is this new lines. So this will basically, I'll just show you. Where's my thing? So we need to restart the server again because the server does all the obfuscation when it first starts up. So yeah, so it's still not working. But now if I open this, we can look at this, and the code is still obfuscated a bunch, but it's starting to look more normal, right? Like that's getting more readable. Whoops. So that's actually I'm going to remove this one as well, which is basically the non-new line white space. So at this point, what we should have is code that will basically look like the original code, except everything has obfuscated names. And of course, all the comments have been stripped out, so there's like too much white space, but you know, that's fine. So the next thing that we can also change, so this uses obfuscated names, but this, what I'm going to do is change this use modified names, not pure obfuscate, which means it's not going to completely change the names, it's just going to modify them a bit so we can tell what they were originally. But there will still be something broken. So here we have this identifier, and what do we have? Should only be used in docs or at the end. What is this? This looks like it's a comment of some sort. But this, okay, is in the point 2D class. So basically we have vectors, right, that can represent position. So we're going to come into our engine, protected scripts, math it should be, and we have this point 2D. So we're going to open this up, and the strange thing was right above this point create. So here we go, is our create. So okay, it looks like for whatever reason this comment wasn't removed properly. So one of the things the obfuscator does is delete all the comments, and actually I have a documentation generation system set up as well, but we'll come to that at another time. But the point is, for now, is we have this comment, and for some reason, it didn't remove the whole thing. It only removed. How much did it remove? Should only be used in docs. So basically, through this $sign. I think I know what that might be. Okay, so we have the obfuscation code in here somewhere. So that is going to be in private, that is server only code, and we have, I think it's in the obfuscator. Yes. This is something that's going to get refactored a bit as well. For one thing, I have hard-coded a bunch of names of the keywords and other stuff like this, and then I've had to have another file where I add like exceptions of like well, actually I don't know if prototype is that's probably in here somewhere already, but there's prototype. But there's other stuff that's like built into the Java libraries of like the DOM or whatever. And I was adding those manually, and I wrote a crawler which pulls out the names of all of the the entire API for the DOM. It takes all of the keywords. It basically crawled the MDN website and pulled basically everything in the API as a big giant list. And so at some point I'm going to apply that, because then a lot of these like little modifications of the obfuscator will not be necessary, or at least will be a lot less. There may still be bugs occasionally, like there is with this one. So, but somewhere we're going to have, I wish, yeah, I want to refactor. This is old code. It was one of the early things I wrote. So somewhere in here are comments. Remove comments. This is probably going to be our magic function. Here we go. So this removes a couple of types of comments. It can remove block comments like this, and then it can remove line comments like so. So for some reason, this is failing to completely remove this guy. You know what it might be? Actually, I'm not certain of that. I thought there was going to be a $sign at the end of this line, because basically so we may need to actually get in there and use our newly set up debugger, but there's part of me that thinks like, oh, if I just think about it for a moment, I might actually know what's causing this. My first guess actually was that this $sign was maybe part of the issue, because the way excuse me, regular expressions work, and this is a regular expression for anybody who doesn't know. Basically, regular expressions allow you to define what strings look like when you're doing string parsing. The regex for JavaScript is pretty nice. You can find documentation of it. In fact, I'll just pull that up really quick as a regex JavaScript. Not that I need it for this particular thing, but you know, people, if they're curious. I forget, somewhere off of, I think this page is a thing about the syntax, but that is not it. Maybe it's in the regex. No, this is W3, not. Okay, well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking for it, but on the MDN page, Probably this one. It looks like they've updated this page. It's not maybe as nice as it would be. But anyway, there's documentation about regular expressions, so you can totally find that if you care. But the point is the dollar sign, or sorry, the money sign is end of a line. And so I was thinking that maybe for some reason the regular expression thing didn't like this. But at the moment, I'm guessing actually probably what really happened is that maybe this when it deleted this comment, maybe somehow hit into the next one. I don't know. It's probably not the case, but let's just try it. If we put it in a white space there. Oh, maybe that will have worked. Or not. Yeah, okay, that was not the issue. It was a shot in the dark. It probably wasn't going to be the case. Okay, I guess maybe the thing to do then is to run the debugger. The problem is, well, we'll solve it on the way. Okay, so what I'm going to do is run my debug server. Yay! And so what we're going to do is come into our engine load, and then somewhere further down we can find where it is going to initialize the server. The web server init and run. I think it's 8. Oh. Wait, this is if it's not multiplayer. You screwed that up. So the thing went right past. There's going to be another web server run down further. Here. All right, we're going to start that over. Here we go. So we got our web server. This is going to basically initialize a bunch of stuff we don't care about. And then we're going to tell the thing to run. So this is going to create Express. This is a sort of deeper topic. Express is basically a library for Node that helps you serve files, cookie parsing. All this stuff is probably important, but let's not get into it right now. If you care, you can read about cookies and stuff like that elsewhere, and maybe we'll come back to it at some other point, but it's off the topic for the day. So we're going to set up some entry points, request logins. We're not doing it. So that's just going to, so here we're going to serve the, okay, so the documentation, generation, we're not going to worry about that. Compressed client code, here we go. Okay, so we're going to tell our code compressor that it needs to basically compress the engine and the game. So we created this guy, and then we're going to make this compact game loader. So that's going to basically read this, the engine loader. I have totally replaced this. The UI library I was mentioning before has a much better way of doing this, and all of this stuff is going to be massively improved when I integrate that. But for the time being, it doesn't matter. So this is basically going to find all the places where it was including code, and it's going to actually strip that out and replace it with the actual content of the files. And like I said, that is really terrible. I have a much better way of doing it now in the other code base. Okay, it's going to replace. Oh, this does the same thing with the game code. And again, all that code will go away once I have enough time to integrate the better implementation of all of this. It will shrink down, get rid of tons of this code, and be a much more elegant solution. So we create the obfuscator, and so this actually should basically be like the code of freaking everything, although only a limited amount can load in the debugger. But we've basically made all of the code already into like one giant block. So this is just going to add the source inside of here, so it basically knows what it is that it's working with. These are namespaces that have already been determined up front, and this probably is not going to remain needed either, but for the time being it's fine. And actually, this is what I was saying earlier about there being stuff built into the DOM that like I had to add manually, and this will also all go away because, like I said, I had a crawler that well, like we can run it again if we need to, but it basically has everything in the API, and so basically these things will not be required because it will know all of these and way more. I forget why it needs those global objects, but it does. It's going to be adding more ignore related stuff, and more. All this stuff will go away. Here we go. Obfuscator run. That's what we care about. So we're going to. This is going to remove all instances of eval because eval is a major potential problem for hackers and whatnot. So yeah, basically that makes sure that that isn't going to happen. So the first thing that's going to try to do is remove the comments. And okay, so this is going to replace the block comments. Now the code has already had all of the block comments removed. Unfortunately, well, we can't see the content of this directly, but what we should actually do now, we can put a breakpoint here, and in the regular version of the code, we're going to actually just print out everything right here, and then we'll see what's going on. And my suspicion is that probably somehow, yeah, I'll just save my suspicions for now. Open with gedit. I think it was already open. It was. So we're going to put in a hack here. Console.log. And we'll just dump out the entire source. Now, what we're going to do when we run the server again, which we're about to, is actually print everything out to a log file, a temp log file, which we'll delete later. Actually, I'll make this will print errors as well. Temp log. And what do we got? That should have brought up my Chrome server. Was debugging it, was I not? That's weird. It's because I didn't actually put the command to run the server. So, temp log. There we go. So now we can tell it to go, and here we are. So we're going to strip everything out, and then we're going to print out the stripped code. So what we should be able to do now is see this temp log file. We're going to open this in gedit, and we're going to be able to see all of the freaking code that's been modified. Now, the bit we care about is this. So let's find where that lives. And it doesn't think that it exists. Isn't that interesting? Very interesting. Is point 2D. That should be in here. Maybe. You're kidding me. Well, wait a minute. Okay, wait, I know what the problem is. So there's a unit test where the compressor compresses itself, and we are in the unit test, not the actual, it's not actually compressing the real code, or the whole code base. So we're going to tell this, oh, whoops. Well, that's good. We're going to tell that to run again. There we are. And so now, now it should be the case. And if we grab this business, this should be in the file. And it's not. That's strange. Okay, does the obfuscator run more than once? Okay. Try it again. You gotta be kidding me. How many times is this? You know what we might have? No, I'm not sure what. That shit will be there now. There we go. So, but the point exists in many places, so no, that's not what we really care about. What we really want to see still is this. So, as you can see, for some reason, when we stripped out the, what you call it, that's bizarre. So it looks like, and maybe I'm mistaken here, but it looks like when we remove this guy, that maybe that stopped or something, or went further than it should have. Something. We're gonna figure it out. Let's run the debugger again. So we're going to tell it to go, and this is unit test related stuff. So here it's going to actually run. Now, just to be sure, okay, so the only thing we should have done so far to the code is replace or basically remove any instances of eval. What I'm going to do actually is print out the code beforehand. As well, just to make sure. Oh man, this debugger is so nicer than the old one. You have no idea, man. This is the old school, man. When I first started working in Node, it was so freaking painful to try to debug the actual server. I mean, don't get me wrong, even then, in a way, it was awesome technology, but it certainly still had its problems. That's interesting. Okay, so we should have printed out the code now. Oops. It's probably getting super slow from because it's a huge amount of text. Yes, so. Oh, no, wait a minute. Isn't that interesting? So we actually haven't removed the block comments yet because they're still here, but something else has axed this. Now the only thing that I think ran before us was the stripping out of the eval. So that has we're going to replace okay, so basically this x65, that's going to be E, and the reason for this being the case is that that way the parser doesn't recognize this. It's a little bit hacky, I suppose, but eval, we want to recognize all of them, and then actually that's going to replace it with single comment. You know, it might be worth actually going back even further. That is really bizarre, if you ask me. Let's because actually this constructor here doesn't appear there, which tells me maybe where's our oh, we don't have the loader open. Well, we do have the loader open here. So let's come back up this way. So basically we set up namespaces. We load our unit test framework. Is that even here? Physics. I guess the question is, where is the point defined? Usually it's not necessary to debug the obfuscator most of the time. It just works, but occasionally there's something weird like this. And yeah, hopefully I'll work out all the bugs of that as well. I actually find it a little bit odd. Actually, wait a minute. I think what we're seeing here, so server script, well, that's under run. Because at this point, we haven't removed any comments in theory. but according to this, we actually have, so this basically goes from the web server code this is bizarre. Well, no worries. Fun problems, right? I wonder, actually, so here's a question. And that is, oh, where's that's in just run. If we go to the run function and print out, where's run? There it is. Let's say that we try printing the code actually before we even comment out the eval, because maybe there's something weird going on even before we get into the obfuscator. That's completely possible. So, whoops. And just because I'm going to put my breakpoint here, then we're going to have to go through that a couple more times. Okay, so here's going to be our real time. So, okay, we printed out the log now. Okay, so whatever's causing this issue, it's happening before we even get in here. Like this is, it's not the obfuscator, which actually is good news. It means the obfuscator is probably still working correctly, although that is bizarre. So what happens before this? We added a bunch of ignores. And there were more. Oops. So actually what's going to happen is it's going to try to replace basically the contents of the loader. And again, this is all going to be so much better when I pull in the newer system from the UI framework I built, because this was the old way I did like most of a decade ago, and yeah, there's a much better way. This is not even the right file. What I want is our loader. No, that isn't right either. This isn't the loader. This is the compressor. Blump, blump. Okay, so this basically, well, actually, we're probably going to need both, if I'm perfectly honest. So what we're going to get here really is, so we have basically these replacements going on for the code, which, oh man, that's such a terrible solution. I've grown so much as an engineer since then, and I can't wait to put it in the newer version. But actually, that's the brilliance of working on a project like this, is that there's many things in the engine which I've rewritten multiple times to make better and better, and that sort of growth with the times and as a person and improving things it's a rewarding process. Okay, so the thing is, basically this code compressor is going to put okay, it's going to search for everywhere where it maybe is going to need to replace some path. Actually, man, this is well, okay, I think we just need to get in here and start debugging this guy. The good news is our code obfuscator can like completely revert all of our changes because it is not the guilty culprit. This guy, however, totally is. So let's figure out, for any of that, we're going to want to come to here. So that's going to load the file, and then let's actually just like debug through this area before we decide where to put more breakpoints. Oh man, this new debugger is so much better. It's awesome. It just makes me really happy. This one's going to be fine. We need to get to the point where it's running the real web server. And here we are. So this is the real one. Okay, so this is going to give us, oh, that's just the regex. Now we are going to match it. So this is going to give us values. Ooh. If I can mouse over it correctly. So this is basically going to give us all of these places. These are all things that it wants to replace with the actual code. And so now it's going to like go over them. And then this regular expression, I think, is going to just take the path. So that's interesting that it's in double quotes. I wonder if that has part of the problem. No, it already recognizes it. So there we have the specific path. It's going to read the files, and then it's going to replace. Go on. It's going to replace that whole string of, say, the protected whatever engine settings with the contents of the source file, which in this case will be the actual engine settings. So that is basically what we wanted to do. So, but the question is which one are we going to actually care about? And it's going to be a while because what we need to find is, actually, you know what we should do? Let the, actually, something, whatever. Okay, we're going to find, where's point? Should have passed it already. The packer. Oh, where's my thing here? Values. Let's make this bigger. I should. Oh, come on. It should be possible to do this. I'm pretty sure. Maybe it isn't. Okay, maybe that is something shitty about the new thing. Okay, I guess we could like add a watch or something. Values. We have an array of 71 things. Here they are. Let's make this a little bit bigger, shall we? Okay. So, loading all kinds of stuff. Actually, here it is. Point to 2D is number 9, as I would expect it to be. So what we could do is basically right here. I just had an idea. Just bear with me 1 second. Oh, no, so much for that plan. I was thinking that maybe there was a duplicated file name or something, and then it was going to like, it doesn't matter, it was wrong. Okay, so what we're going to do is in our code compressor around 73, which is here. Actually, here we're going to say if I equals 9, which is our point, then we're going to print out the contents. Although, oh yeah, we're going to print this guy. So we can run, oh, and this is the obfuscator that's innocent. Actually, that is as well. Oh, this is our call. Okay, yeah, we can ignore this for now. Okay, so here's where we're going to actually care. And what I'm going to have to do, oh good, there's already a breakpoint there. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here as well. So that's going to run. And what we should have now, I equals 9, and our 9th value is the point. So we should have just replaced the point. And now we're going to print that out. So what we can now do is look at our log, reload, and that is already corrupt. Isn't that interesting? Ah, look what we have here. I know what's happening. It was related to that $sign. I freaking knew it. So what's happening here is we're getting more stuff inserted somewhere inside that $sign. Look at that. See, all of this stuff is getting inserted into the $sign. So let's go back to this thing. So what is this actually saying? Refactor $ should only be used in docs or at the end of the line, or be removed. Or doc is static true. Ah, okay, yes. So the reason for this is basically the documentation system is using $sign to recognize certain things as static, and I wanted to deprecate that because it's a crappy way of doing it. But apparently when I put in this thing to do it, yes, so I'm going to put in like name, and that will probably just fix it outright, because you notice that, like, oh, that seemed to be that's interesting. But you know what? All of these problems would be way easier to fix if I had finished the check-in a year and a half or more ago when I was working on this. But as life happens and it got backburnered, and then it's like, oh, there's code changes and all this stuff and what was going on and not the mindset of it or whatever. So in general, it's really good if you debug your code straight away, but some cases that's not possible. But I'm going to bet now, actually, that just whatever. Okay, I'm not even sure that comment completely makes sense, but if I run just the regular server, whoops. Okay, whatever. So we should actually be running. Let's see if this works now. And it does. So basically we just had a poison comment was all. And the thing is, actually, it would be good to know why, because technically that thing should be legal, I would think. Where's my like having it as it was before should be okay. We shouldn't fuck up over that. Excuse my French. So the question is really why? Let's run it again, because what I want to happen, actually, I would like to be able to not have to change the comment. Okay, so we've now dumped the data out to our log. Reload yes. Find the thing. So somehow we've injected all of this into our file, the point file, which is kind of odd if you ask me. So it might be useful let's go back to our starter debugger again. So I guess actually I should put in a thing before number 9, but we can just count them. So that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just make sure I'm on point. Oh, 6. I think I slowed down. This one will be 7, 8. So this is 9, our magic time. So our path here is protected engine scripts math .2d. We're going to read in the source file, and now let's check that nothing is corrupted here. So at this point everything's fine. This is the actual source file exactly as it should be. Here we can see our code is not changed. So somehow the replace here, when we tell this thing that we want to replace in our value for number 9, which is going to be, actually I wonder if that's a little bit strange looking. I guess there's just white space beforehand. But the file source is uncorrupted. So it looks like somehow this replace that is really freaking bizarre. So for some reason it's got to be that this call when we're going to basically, we have the code here and somewhere it's going to have the, actually probably can't scroll down all the way. It doesn't hold that much string in the debugger, unfortunately. apparently. It's going to replace the include line. Let's close this up and add another watch. So we're going to basically replace this line with the actual code, but for some really strange reason, when it does that, it actually inserts a bunch of crap into that $sign. That is totally unexpected to me, I think. Let's see if there's something on the web to talk about this. Replace. You know what? Pattern specifying a string as a parameter. The replacement string can include the following special. So here we go. It is to do with that function. When string replace, the replacement string can include the following special replacement patterns. So this is going to insert a $sign, insert a matching substring, insert a portion of the string that precedes, insert a portion of the string that follows the matched substring. What exactly does that mean? Inserts the portion of the string that follows. Wait a minute, though, that isn't actually in the replacement. Right? It's in the wrong thing. Where was I? Oh, this is one thing you get of it. So the replacement string doesn't actually have that $sign in there. So still, though, I'm pretty sure it has to do with what do we have here? Yeah. So, yep, okay. No, I think this makes sense. No, that is the replacement string. So, okay, so the replacement string has this like magic character in it in terms of the JavaScript's replacement thing, which I did not know that about their thing, or else I'd forgotten it. So actually, I guess what we really do have to change the actual comment because that is built in. That's actually kind of annoying, I think. But hey. But you know what, dude, I had a feeling from the very beginning that it had something to do with that the $sign character, and I was right about that. So I guess we have that. Yeah, okay, so what I was actually saying here, I am going to put this in name. So whatever, basically, $sign name should only be used in the docs or go at the end or be removed. Actually, yeah, so it must have been the case at some point. I think somewhere, yeah, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're going to change this comment anyway. There we go. So basically, that is about changing the documentation generation, because basically, I have my own parser for generating documentation, which we'll look at. It's pretty fancy. I looked at a bunch of existing ones before I wrote one, because I was like, why make something that if there exists? But I wasn't happy with any of the ones that existed, and I was like, how hard can it be? I started out with being like, oh, I'll just make some JSON structure and I can just parse that. I'll just specially mark comments. I can easily parse out the document or JSON structure, and then with some JSON validation, verify that the comments are formatted correctly, and then use them to generate stuff. And I started with that and it worked pretty well, but JSON structure was a little bit too much. And so basically, I simplified it, and now the comments are not exactly JSON. They have, you can write them a little bit more simply. And honestly, I should probably change some of the stuff anyway to be closer to like Doxygen or something like this. In terms of syntax, it's sort of in that neighborhood, I think, but it'd probably be worth referencing. In fact, dude, you know what? Why don't I even make a comment of that and just say like, oh, refactor. This is a bad place for it, but whatever. The good thing is these specific to-dos get pulled out and somewhere else, and the one there says it's a high priority, so it'll probably be seen. And I should probably put it in an appropriate place, but I'm going to be lazy in this case because I just am. Don't do that at home. What was I saying? Oh yeah. Look into aping. Is that spelled right? I don't know. Whatever. Aping. Doxygen. Syntax. A bit more. Which I might already have sort of done, but whatever. Okay. So the good news is what we should be able to do now actually is go back to our engine settings. We should be able to reset these values that we changed. So the client code should be compressed and all of these things are going to be on except for this using modified names. And what should happen now is that the game should be able to run just fine. Can I run it without being debugged? Thank you. No. Run server, there we go. It should be able to run just fine even though it is still compressed. Boom, and boom, look at that. So our code is totally freaking unreadable. It's been minimized as much as it possibly can be, or well, probably not completely, but very nearly. And it still runs and does not have any like, well, technically there's one error, but that's because it was testing. This is on purpose to test that I don't remember what. It's a invalid file that it probably, you know what this probably is testing is that the texture and tile sheets have like a placeholder, and this is probably just validating that, oh, if it can't find the thing, it uses the placeholder, that's the case, right? So we've got it like a broken asset, and then it's turning up as this hot pink thing that says it's a placeholder, and so that's not really an error. So otherwise, everything looks good. All of our unit tests are still pass, even with the obfuscation. We can connect. The only error message we have is the one that's there on purpose to validate that, or because it's telling you that some play. And actually, maybe that it should even be a warning, right? But I guess it really depends. Potato, I suppose. I guess in development, I could see an argument for why there's no collision on that property, apparently. But other ones do that does. No problem. Okay, so dude, we've made some progress. So the game is running, and we fixed, we've updated Node and Mongo. We have, although actually I don't know if the Mongo stuff is working properly because we don't have login stuff turned on. And maybe I should test that, but honestly, I think I'm not going to at the moment because it is an issue that will, I don't know, it's always not fantastic to let things, if it's becomes a bug at some point, I'll fix it. But the point is for stuff that we know that we've had to change, we fixed it. So the client code is back to being compressed. We've tightened up the scripts. The debugger, which we had to remove and updating, is. Oh, wait a minute. Did we not delete those? Debug server. Where's our? Yeah, those should not exist anymore. I think if I, close without saving. Close without saving. So yeah, we've improved the system so that we're using the debugger. We actually used the debugger to find a problem, which turned out to just be from a comment that didn't parse very nicely. And maybe at some point we should, I don't know, figure out a nicer solution than just changing that particular comment. Although I'm not sure what that would be at the moment, or if it's really something that I want to focus on. Yeah, so I guess the next thing is basically I have a bunch of changes that are related to whatever changes I was working on before, and those are actually paired with game-specific code. That is not in the engine project, because I have a game project and the engine project, and then also this UI project as well, and a few others as well. The installation one is another. There's several things that kind of go together. A lot of the changes that's going to be in here are maybe not relevant to people looking on, but we're going to start. We'll kind of look at them anyway. Why not? Okay, so the first thing is our debug server is gone, so that's expected. And so is the other version. And the node debugger is gone. Both versions. I cleaned up the npm install to get rid of this npm edge, which was out of date, and also got rid of this redundant list thing. Especially the first time, this would print a bunch of errors because stuff was missing, and that made nicer output. and that's the other version. This is the thing, the old thing telling it to run both. Now it just runs the one, which is what we want. And actually it's the same for this guy. The old one that used to run both now just runs the debugger, or just runs the thing to debug. Okay, we can get rid of this change. Code compressor. So we don't actually want that to change. That was just some debug code that we put in. Can I refresh this? I think. I guess it's not smart enough to do that. Well, I probably will run over it again before I check them in. I tend to do it multiple times. Okay, so this is animation code that I was changing because reasons. No, you know, I don't even think I want to go into it because it's maybe pointless to explain. But the changes themselves are sort of simple. Basically, the initialization of the bounding box for the animation is moved into the init function. Furthermore, it gets a default name and ID. And here I'm saying like, oh, I should probably make this a game object, which is true, especially because what I will probably do in the long run is make the animation, the actual data. Right now it's hard-coded to generate the frames in the game rules, and I will eventually make it possible to edit all of those frames in the editor, which doesn't really exist at the moment, but all the UI code for it does. One of the things I have is a UI like property kind of panel that you can edit any JSON data with it that you want in a nice UI. So probably, and you can also give it a schema, so it like forces you to follow the proper structure. So I probably will set that up at some point, and especially at that point, then that data will be in the MongoDB as the animation data, and basically, because right now, okay, there's a game object, which is most of the things that are emulated in the world are game objects, but the animation currently isn't. But once it is, we won't need this like get name, set name, get ID, blah, 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 because that's already built into game object. And then the object, the game object that is the animation will know how to retrieve the actual data for it from the database. Well, actually, we'll have a local database that where things cache, but that's neither here nor there. So this is sort of temporary, but for the time being, it's needed, because basically both the client and the server are like creating this animation data procedurally in parallel, and then when someone is getting the animation, they just need to be told like basically the ID of it or whatever, and then they can load the actual animation locally. And here I changed the code so that the thing knows its own name, which it sets, and then basically that's that. Okay, this is a comment that's not formatted properly, and since this whole file is going to get reformat, going to do more cleanup on this file, I didn't bother doing everything I needed to do to make this comment properly parsable by the documentation system, and that's all that is. It's a thing to fix. This, in the debug drawing of input, I changed it from blue, why the hell was it blue, I don't know, to gray, which says, oh, it's inactive, and gray just makes more sense. For some reason, documentation was was set to off by default, and I set it to true, which actually that means the documentation should be generating now. Is that thing running? It is. So actually, if we go back to here, we should be able to view the documentation. Now, not all the documentation is finished, but basically, I'm aiming for a like JavaScript, or sorry, Java doc like thing where you can basically come in and see stuff. This isn't completely finished. Oh, well, actually, the documentation system mostly is proper, but like the engine code itself needs a lot of the documentation needs to actually be into the code. But I can also like generate diagrams and stuff. This is a pretty big one because it's basically showing everything that's been documented for namespaces and objects and stuff as far as they've been documented. This would be like the big, massive, top-level thing, which you usually wouldn't look at. But basically, you can like find all the members and stuff, and it will actually link to where it is in the code and stuff. So, oh, what's up with that? Well, that's a bug. So, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. So that links properly. For whatever reason, oh, I know why. It's because this type, the web server, hasn't been documented yet, probably. And so what happens is if the type is unrecognized, it tries to open it in MDN, which usually works if it's like float or whatever, or not float, but like number or string or regex or some basic type. But in this case, it should actually be linking to my web server, but when it generated the documentation, this is obviously not documented yet, so it couldn't link to it. Yeah, see, we got web server tools, but not the actual web server. The Mongoose is partly done, but it looks like only the very top level of it. Anyway, I have to do a lot more stuff for the documentation. But one thing that is cool, although I don't know, I think actually there's more, should be more being generated than just this. Somewhere I have yeah, this is actually not even generating everything that there is. Oh, you know what it is? No, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's the documentation system itself is mostly working, but the actual documenting the code is something that I need to do a lot more of. But I think there's more documented than this. And somewhere, I don't know where there's a good example of it, or at least I thought that I did. But it also can generate like function diagrams and stuff as well if you put inline comments inside the functions, and I probably will do that on like more complicated algorithms and stuff more at some point. This is not all of the documentation, I'm certain of it. I wonder if, I don't know, I'll look into that later. It's really not important for the moment. Although, yeah, so I'm going to turn this back off for the time being because that was the default. And those ones can stay. Go ahead and save it, yeah. What are we looking at? The game event. This is just generating an input event. The constructor now just does defaulty things. It looks like. Actually, all of these events need, I'm going to change this as well because the new UI system has a much better event system. So that's going to be replaced. But basically, yeah, this clones all the game state information so that the input can be delivered. And that was, I don't know, something new. That's just a renaming, doesn't matter. So we have mouse state, keyboard state. Is there control? Yeah, gamepad state. So these are new classes that I had added that I think keep track of the previous state, probably for doing diffs or something. I want to do a bunch of refactor on this as well. Actually, man, I want to do rewrites of a lot of stuff, but you know, whatever. I'm not gonna like go through every detail about this. I don't think it matters really at the moment. They were, I mean, some of it's just renaming things, which why I did that in the middle of another change list, who knows? Asked myself 2 years ago, or 3, whenever this, 2, probably 2. Whatever, anyway, whatever's going on in here, I will take a more deeper look at this class later on. The point is, we know for the moment it's working. It looks like one thing I added was some documentation on this, so the input documentation should be there. Is that a thing? Input. Oh, that's from on the settings though. Classes. Input. Yeah, so here we go. So we can see as an example, this inherits from the event system, which will be replaced with a newer one, but that's neither here nor there. The event system has this event to listeners map, constructor, create, listen, deregister. That's part of why I want to, I'm not even going to get into it. But basically the main thing that the input system has is an update function. Although it does have some members. Here are the methods. Oh, actually, this is the methods that inherited actually from event system. So we can actually look at you can jump to wherever that's defined. That will take you to the other class. So for example, actually let's pick a more interesting one. This register listener. So as we can see, this has to-dos in it. It knows where the parameter, what parameters there are, which you can then link. And this is what I was saying about like, oh, it links to the proper MDN documentation. So basically, in the long run, this once everything in the engine is documented, it will be much easier to sort of figure out a lot of stuff, because you'll be able to search inside of the code or the documentation to find stuff, kind of like you do with Java docs, if you've ever used that before. I don't really like Java, but Java doc is one thing that they did well. So this is the 2 changes I had before. This is basically some custom extensions I have to the basic types. So for example, I can tab and indent strings, but I'm probably going to move this to another library in the UI system. I also have this power of 2 table. I forget why I have this. It speeds up something somewhere. I think it's an old school programmer trick. I forget. I think actually this is doing a shortcut for logarithm-based compression or something. I can't remember. And that's irrelevant. Just some helper stuff for the tile map. in the future, I hopefully will, once all of the old code is like wrapped up and submitted and people can run, then I will try to focus more on understanding the system. I guess right now it's still a little bit playing catch up, clean up from the code base not having been touched in a really long time, and so having to upgrade things, but also because there was stuff that was like in some manner of progress that didn't manage to get checked in before I took the giant hiatus of real life moving internationally and working and different things like this. This is the asset manager, basically being able to support saving and loading those animations. I'm just going to leave that as is. Who knows why, but the timer needed to be able to get the delta frame time, and it couldn't before. Who knows why that. Just helper functions for the camera that we're missing. There's a bunch of, yeah, dude, one thing that I plan to do when I do the documentation as well is like go through every file and like do some cleanup on it as I document it, and then change its location in the directory structure, because not all the files are supported or sorted right where they should be. So this is basically a report on the obfuscation process, and so basically I can see new things that get added or other things that get removed in terms of keywords. So for example, this input game pad state is something that's new and came along, and whatever game object registered used to exist no longer does. Why that's the case, I'm not sure, what have you, but at any rate, the prefab object was new, so that makes sense. That probably shouldn't exist, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. There have been times when I use this as a sort of another view to understand what's changing in the code besides a direct diff, and it can be kind of useful also because if the obfuscator really like screws up, maybe things will disappear that shouldn't or something like that, which would sort of be a warning. Looking at this file is not really needed per se, but at times it was helpful to figure out stuff. So look, in this case, this my event listeners was changed to my event listeners map, so that makes sense why it was just like a rename or whatever. Anyway, I'm not going to look at this with a fine-tooth comb this time, but it is something that's potentially handy at times, but right now it doesn't matter, so I'm not going to worry about it. More renames that don't matter. And this is basically changing the code so that basically, yeah, the animation knows its own name now, which it didn't used to. Renaming. All those input stuff got renamed. This is a backlog file that I moved somewhere else out of the project because it doesn't matter to be in GitHub. Also, I think not really relevant to us at the moment. Actually, we're going to go through a whole bunch of freaking files that I removed because does this give me the path? No. Basically, I'll actually show this. I need another tab to do it though. well, you can't read that very well. I have all this, used to have all this scratch work, which was random early implementations of things or whatever, and most of it is out of date, or already implemented properly or whatever. It just didn't belong inside the code base, and so like I basically moved all of that outside of the project space, and I will sort through it probably at some point and see if there's anything irrelevant that still needs to be kept, but my guess is that the vast majority of it no longer matters for anything. The only thing is that's sort of annoying is that now there's like a billion things that are recognized for delete. Who the heck even knows what that was? Maybe I should have done that as a different check-in. I guess I still could if I like copied them back. And yeah, I mean, some of it is just like, who knows how old it was. It was just like accumulating scratch work for a decade. So I cleaned all that out, so that went away. When it gets checked in, we won't have all this useless crap taking up extra space in the repository because it's irrelevant. And man, there is a ton of that crap. Although actually, oh no, this was super old. Okay, so here we actually have relevant changes again. Most of this is just white space that was changed automatically, but we've got version numbers of things changing here. Node Inspector and npm Edge both went away. Basically everything else got big updates. And I think that was everything. It appears to be. Okay, what do we got going on here? I think if I say git add dot git status, so here we'll have basically set up everything that we needed for the change. I think, oh, we can remove this temp log file that we were using for debugging. We don't need that anymore. Actually, I'm going to remove it. Temp log. So now we have this guy here, and I think, I forget the command. I used to know these off the top of my head, but I'm going to have to check it at the moment. Oops, I don't want. Why is this maximized? Go away. Come on. How do you unmaximize this? Oh, there we go. Temp log. Close. Temp log should be gone, yes. Wait, hold on. We need to add this package JSON to the git ignore file. gedit git ignore. So there's a bunch of stuff here. it ignores the lots of stuff, but we need to wait, what was it called again? The package lock. That is a new feature that didn't used to be there, or the older version of NPM. I think get reset head temp block should do the trick. Okay, so we modified the get ignore, we've deleted the debug server, bat and shell, we've deleted the node debugger, bat and shell, we modified the npm installs and the server, we changed animation, engine settings, game event. We modified graphics. We're gonna go through do a diff again. The input, yep. Math, yep. This extensions, yes. The prefab is a new file altogether. We modified the tiles, the asset manager, the timer, the camera, the obfuscation results, and the entity component input, along with the game rules. And then we deleted basically everything that was in that notes, scratch work folder because it's no longer relevant, and we need to reset the head on this package thing because that should not be added. Reset head status there where it's no longer visible. Okay, so we should be just about ready to check in everything on the engine changes that we made. For those of you who don't, I think I'm going to go through this again one more time just to be like super extra cautious, but I'm not going to bother streaming that. I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and then yeah, well, I think I'm going to take a short break and I will double check the diffs again just to make absolutely sure everything is looking okay before I check that in. I'm still not quite ready to push, I think, because I want to get everything set up in such a way with the installation project as well, so that people will very easily be able to just connect or just download things, run it, and start running. And I promise that will not be the case at the moment because environmental dependencies and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take that break, and I will be back in a while. And actually, I will save the check-in for then, I think, mainly for just so people can see it in action. If you don't know Git, it's not a big deal, but you never know, maybe somebody out there is watching and get something from that experience. So, all right, well, I'll be back, and we'll talk to you then.